I always tell people that my career was so accidental, which I hope should give people hope. But when it comes to talking shop and bits and bytes, nobody using your product cares. You can optimize that train all you want, but once it hits that brake, it's going to crash.
This is the Future of the Future show. I am your host, Mateo Berbejicio. In today's episode, we explore what it really takes to build a meaningful career in tech, one that goes beyond code and into impact. My guest is Matthew Moran, a seasoned IT strategist and executive, author, and career development expert whose work has shaped how professionals think about long-term success in technology. Today, we will dive into his concept over process methodology, unpacking how starting from business objectives can completely reshape the solutions you build. Along the way, we also get personal, talking about work-life balance, creative outlets like music, and how those experiences influence leadership and problem solving. This is a conversation about thinking bigger, working smarter, and building a career with intention. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Matt, let's start way back to the beginning. What first pulled you into technology, and what were the defining moments that shaped your career path?
I always tell people that my career was so accidental, which I hope should give people hope. You can kind of figure out your direction as you go. I don't think you need to have such a solid as a matter of fact, I think today, even more so than before, it's better to be flexible, be ready to move and take advantage of situations. So I was always kind of an English, writing guy. Those were the classes English and history is where I really gravitated to. I wasn't really strong at math. But in high school, a friend took one of the first computer classes that was available in LA Unified. And it was on an Apple IIe computer. And he showed me something he wrote one day that literally just said, a prompt on your screen, what is your name? You type in the answer, whatever you type in, and it just blinked on the screen. And I was like, how'd you make it do that? He showed me the code, and he had a book called Basic Apple Basic. You can still, I see the book online, people are selling it or have it, whatever. You can find it, see what it looks like. And he walked away, and I just started playing around with code and writing things, and pretty much did all his assignments for school. I think he did fine in the class, got an A. And by the end of the year, I'd written a little text-based game. And then I wrote a database to keep track of books because I had lots of books. My dad and I were kind of avid. Well, my whole family, everybody was a reader. So we were always at the used bookstore. I had some first edition, so I'd lend books out. I want to make sure I could get them back. So I wrote a little library book, a library tracking system. Really, once again, never thought of it as a career. It was never going to be something I did. But eventually I took that and converted it to a D-based program a couple of years later on a 286 PC. And then I was hired by Blue Cross to do data entry because I could type. And while doing that, an opportunity came up. The person that was developing the software worked in my department or adjacent to it. And he was on vacation, and a director of the department came in, needed a report. Nobody knew how to get it. And I said, I think I can do that. And jumped into DBase. It was a Clipper application, which is a DBase compiler back in the day. And so the files were DBase files. And using DBase, I was able to get in and get them the report they needed or the data they needed. And a day later, he came back and said, can you get me this? I got him that. And by the end of the week, when the person came back the following week, they just kind of reassigned me to him and said, you're creating reports. And suddenly I was working in data all the time. And still never really thought of it as a career. It was just like something I was doing. I don't really think I had much direction other than the fact that I had a young child and the need to do something was necessary. And a job came up across the street. I submitted an application for it. It was actually creating document assembly using WordPerfect and Word for DOS macros. My application was rejected because I didn't meet the minimum qualifications. They had other things they were doing reporting wise. I'd never used so many of these programs, and I actually called the director of the department, introduced myself, and said, I really think I could do this job. She said, submit your application. I said, I did. They rejected it. And she said, I'll pull your application through. And she did. When she came back, she was up in Oakland, and had an interview with them, and they hired me. And I spent 6 years creating document assembly systems and databases to track these contracts going through Blue Cross of California. And that suddenly I realized, probably a couple years into that, I said, oh, I write software. I guess that's what I do. And so it was, once again, I wish I could tell people that I had some grand master plan that I followed. I think my grand master plan is make sure that money was coming in to take care of the kids, and try and have fun along the way.
And so you were a lot into English and history, but you transitioned into writing software, which at that time meant knowing how to write code and the syntaxes and getting everything right. It's changing now, and now it's going back to, people say it's going back to plain English, right? So it's like a first circle. But at that time, it meant a lot about learning the exact syntaxes and knowing what to put where and knowing where to find the issues if there were some. How was that? What did you like about that? Were you, very orderly, very disciplined? There was a logic to it that made sense to you. What first got you like, okay, I can do this and I like this and I enjoy spending a lot of time doing this?
I don't know if I would say I was orderly, but I guess I view things in a pretty logical way.
Right.
I do think I benefited from not working in the IT department, and this run counter to what a lot of people learn coming out of IT degrees. But I worked in a user department. I was getting my instructions from the people using my code. I always say that there weren't change requests. If you had a bug in the program, it wasn't like they submitted something and in 3 weeks you're going to get it. It was more like they walked around the corner to my cubicle, slapped me in the back of the head and say, you're making our life difficult, fix this. And it made me very cognizant of what they did. And I will tell you, there was, kind of a funny reality was the first database I wrote in Clipper, which was that D-base compiler. I just kind of jumped into it. Had some recursive elements to it, but didn't really understand memory management and wasn't backing out of these recursive calls. And, a couple times a day, the program, people were using it, it would just crash. And I would tell people, oh yeah, it's because of the database or whatever. Fully aware that I had done something wrong, but it just took me time to figure out, I need to do. So there were things that, trial by fire, I think. But it was fine. I was enjoying it. I love solving problems. I love, more than anything else, I love sitting down with the business users, whether it's management or individuals, and finding out what they do and see what I can do to solve their problem or make their job easier, kind of direct impact. So I really enjoy that. I'm not much of a, and even back then, life cycle development has never been my favorite thing. Like, working on the same code base for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even though I did. What I enjoyed about where I was working or what I was doing is that there were always new needs, right? So once they knew they had a captured individual, they didn't have to go to IT, they didn't have to change request. I had a very demanding boss, which I had no problem with that. But she'd say, we need this, and I need to see something in a week. And there was no sense of like, this is going to take, so sometimes I was throwing things together that just worked, but they worked enough to give me a little more time to make them truly work, right? So, but I love that. I love that. I still love that piece of what I do. And in regard to things like AI, as much as yes, people can use language prompts, we'll get to it, but I'm working for Meta right now on their generative AI team, and helping develop workflow applications, and everybody's using AI, individuals who don't develop. And while that's great, it's also a little bit of the Wild West because they don't understand data governance. They don't really understand if something's built for them and it creates a screen that shows them something, that's success for them. And
Right.
sometimes the data is not correct. Sometimes it's not really integrated with anything. And so I'm still in the mode of coaching people back to, well, you still have to understand some things about data and workflow and systems, and it's almost at a stage now where without that developer's eye, things are getting a little bit they're kind of running amok, and
Right.
I think it will resolve itself over time, but right now things are pretty messy.
You mentioned that IT departments often struggle to align with business objectives, causing management to view them merely as an expense or a cost center, right? How can an individual IT professional use the business first mentality to transform into a producer of strategic value? And why is this important?
Well, so first of all, there's, as stereotypical as it is, there was an old Saturday Night Live skit of, I think it was something Burns, I don't know, the IT guy. And he was kind of a jerk. He didn't have great social skills. He was a little bit myopic. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room, which he might have been, but he could be really dismissive of the people he was helping. And as much as that's a stereotype, there's some truth to it. So I think this is going to sound almost kind of woo-woo and silly, but I think you have to care, right? It really matters that you care. As a matter of fact, I did a project with a guy when I first started at Meta, and he's a data analyst. And I work remote. I'm down in Los Angeles. He's up in the Bay Area, but I was up there for an event, so he and I grabbed dinner, and he said, the difference between you and other people I work with on stuff like this is you care. You care
Right.
about the project. You care about the impact. It's not just a task to do. And I do. And two elements to that. So one is I think you need to have empathy. Two, I think you need to understand that it's about the value you bring the organization. That's the only reason IT exists, is to bring value to the organization or to the department or the individuals. And if you don't think in terms of that, you can confuse yourself and think that it's about how good you are at your technology. And I think it's great. Be great at your technology, but that's really secondary. Look, I love being the hero. I love getting the accolades for getting something right and things working great. But when it comes to talking shop and bits and bytes, nobody using your product cares. They just
Right.
don't. It's not important to them.
So tell me more about your concept over process methodology, the concentric circle of analysis, and maybe if you can walk us through an example where this changed the technical solution you chose compared to a traditional process-driven approach.
Sure. The first thing I tell people is, as much as possible, and this goes back to early on, is try not to position yourself as X technology professional or whatever. So people, let's go way back. I'm a COBOL developer, and I'd always go, well, I'm a solution architect. That's what I am. And I don't care about the technology. Now we all have our favorite technology. So when I say I don't care, I may gravitate to something because I'm either comfortable with it or whatever, and that's great. But the number of times that you have people that go, oh, because this is what I develop in, this is what the solution will be in. And I'm always saying, well, what if there's a better tool? And you can adopt those tools pretty quickly because I used to work on AS400s, which is an old IBM mid-range system, kind of green screen or those amber screen terminals, right? And I was integrating PC networks with those things and pulling data off them. And I would tell people, I'd go, well, an AS400 is just like a laptop, just like a PC. And the AS400 people are like, what? It's so powerful. And I go, yeah, but it's got a hard drive, and it's got memory, and it's got an operating system, and it's got I/O. There's inputs and outputs. I go, it's the same except for the differences. And the reason I'd say that is I want to come into it from a technology agnostic perspective and say, let's not worry about the technology. Let's not even worry about the process. Let's start first with, are we solving the right problem? And another analogy I use, sorry, you'll find that I have these tangential analogies, but it's what I've used to discuss things with business, with my clients, is sometimes I was brought into waste management for a project, and they're like, can you bring this project in? We want to get it back on budget and on time. And I said, I can't promise you I'll do that, but I can promise you it'll be the right project. Because the problem is, if I come in here and make things more efficient, let's use this analogy. If you have a train that's running down a track, and somewhere down that track, you don't realize it, but the track is broken. The bridge is down, and you can optimize that train all you want, but once it hits that break, it's going to crash, and it's going to be a disaster. And that doesn't help anybody. So rather than, let's stop for a minute, let's just not throw coals into the engine, and let's go make sure that the track is going where we need it to go. And if it is, great, we can optimize. But if it's not, we'd be better off either stopping the project or realigning it with where it should show up. So that's the first thing of concept over process, is this idea that, I guess they'd call it the lost cost fallacy. Like, well, we're so far into this project, we've got to put it in. Yeah, but it's not going to solve your problem. Don't put it in. As painful as that is, the money and time lost can be a learning experience, and you can then move forward. So that was kind of what I did with waste management. And what it ended up doing is, they had X solution that they were building, and I said, we can build it much simpler, because really this is what you're trying to achieve. We don't need ... We can tear that all down, and we can now realign it and do this. And in effect, we brought the project in under budget, in better time, just because we disbanded with extraneous stuff that was not really necessary to the project, or really just fundamentally changed the project. So that's kind of how the approach goes. So I always tell people, if nothing else, you want to understand what the business is doing. What's its goal? What is it? How does it actually function? And I talk about this thing called departmental immersion. There's not always time to do it adequately, but you would do well to sit with the people who are going to use your product and go, how do you really work? Because if I create a solution that doesn't guide or match how you work, or we don't fundamentally explain why we need to change the way we work, what you're doing is you're doing technology to them rather than building solutions with them. And doing technology to people is unnerving. That's why you have so much, it's hard enough to implement change, and change is there's such a pushback against it all the time. But if you're just kind of like taking a hammer and slamming technology in place over their head, there's emotional pushback, there's fear, there's any number of things that are going to derail what you're doing. So you're really getting in there and going, oh, I see what you're doing. Would it be helpful if this? Would it be helpful if X took place? Really? You could do that? Yeah, you could do that. So let's work towards that, right?
Let's shift gears a little bit and start talking about work-life balance, right? Do you believe work-life balance is a real goal, or is it more about trade-offs depending on the season of life? What do you think?
I'd like to say that I don't even know what work-life balance is, right? It certainly changes necessarily the season of life you're in, right? You mentioned getting kids off to school. I see people that are young parents with kids, and I love that period of time. I have 4 kids. I love that period of time. But it is necessarily outrageously busy and chaotic, right? There's always something happening, and you have significantly less time to kind of create anything like balance. I was working, like I said, I started with Blue Cross. Started, had 4 kids pretty quickly, 3 very quickly, and then 1 a little bit later. And I was also coaching soccer teams, and whatever those outings were, field trips, all that stuff. I tried to be very involved. I loved that, but it didn't give me a lot of time to kind of like, oh, I want to sit back and play guitar. I want to write music. I want to sit and write. It just doesn't, So in that regard, you have to. Your expectation should be that I'm going to be busy with kids, right? And there are times I'll see people who don't have kids, and I'll be like, more power to you. Like, go do the things you love to do, and you'll have extra money and extra time. And that's not to dismiss the fact that I loved having kids, but you have to really understand that occurs. And now I'm at a point where it's me and my partner and my guitars, and my mornings are to myself. I'm not getting kids off to school. We did take our grandkids in for a period of time, had them living with us, three young girls. And that was like, my partner and I looked at each other going, holy cow, like, was it always this exhausting? Oh, we don't have the same energy. That's just the reality of life. But we're suddenly like doing the same thing in the mornings, getting lunches ready, which kind of relates to why I get up so early in the morning. I built a structure really when I was writing my first book, where I said, man, the only way I can buy time is have it in the morning before anybody gets up. And that just kind of became my standard. I mean, I've always loved mornings, and my whole family loves mornings, but that's kind of how that really started, is mornings could be protected time, right?
Let's talk about music a little bit. What sparked your recent push to invest more time and energy into music? And what does it give you that technology or anything else doesn't?
So I've played guitar for many years. I think I started when I was like 10 or 11. My dad was a banjo player, and I heard him play, or he recorded Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind on a banjo on a little cassette tape. My dad had this low booming voice, and he always played like folk music, and even though our influences were kind of all over the place, I was very fortunate to have parents who liked the theater, and I went and saw, I think I saw Jesus Christ Superstar when I was 11 years old at the Universal Studios, like their amphitheater or whatever it was, and several other plays. Went to the Pantages with my parents, and I was the youngest of the boys, and I just really loved doing those things. So in any case, I've always played and started writing songs almost immediately. I'm not saying they're great, but wrote some stuff in high school that I still play to this day, and have always loved just being in the mode of like being solitary and sitting down with my guitar and penning, putting something onto paper. So I love that process. Later, as my kids were older, I was living in Arizona, and my first marriage was really coming to an end. The kids kind of saw the writing on the wall as well. My older kids bought me a guitar. It's not back here right now, but another guitar, and they kind of gave it to me on Father's Day and said, go play your music. Like, you've been writing it forever and not playing it, and you have a little more time now. And so I started playing out in Arizona, really great music town called Cave Creek, and enjoyed it. I loved being on stage, right? I just love the energy, and I'm not shy at all. So it's a pretty good place for me to be. And started playing out, and actually developed a little bit of a following. I have a mailing list of a few thousand people, and moved back to California and kind of kept doing that, but my youngest came to live with me at that time, around 2013. She attended the Performing Arts High School in downtown, and I was touring across country twice a year doing house concerts, but it didn't really work out that we could continue doing that while she was living with me. Taking off for 3-4 weeks at a time, driving your car across the country, sometimes sleeping in truck stops doesn't really work for a 13-year-old girl. But we had a great time with her going to this. She's a wonderful singer. And so she attended this performing arts school, which is great. When she was out of school and then getting out on her own, I started playing again, and right then COVID hit. And so that kind of kiboshed, couldn't really do house concerts across the country. So I worked on some things, worked on learning recording and production, and, really had some things come up. Once again, we took in our grandkids, and my third child also came to be with us for a couple of years. But now we're at a point where we're kind of, I hate to even say it, but kind of liberated from responsibility of anybody else at the moment.
Right.
And so we just, had some great musical experiences this last year at a music festival where I just kind of said, this is where I want to be. This is the people I want to be around. This is the community I love. This is what I'm going to do. And so I just took a deep dive into, got a vocal coach. He's kind of a vocal performance coach. He's an extremely talented individual. And so we talk guitar, tone, recording, vocals, everything. He's kind of, I call him my music director is really what I call him. And I just dove into it and said, this is what we're going to do. So now I'm performing a lot more and planning on doing even more of that, doing recording like I was this morning. And actually was recently named the director of a music festival that's getting ready to have our first little festival in Austin, Texas next month.
That is an amazing story. Something I have to ask, a weird question, but uh, with your
Shoot.
love with your love for folk music and Bob Dylan and everything, what did you think of the movie? Did you like the movie? Yes, no, so so.
I did. I really liked it. So I put off seeing it for so long, just because Bob Dylan sits in a historic kind of place, right? Like he's bigger than life. I once wrote I wrote on my Substack this essay titled "The Day I Slept with Bob Dylan," and it's really just tongue in cheek, but it's really when I met Joan Baez on a fluke in downtown LA, and I kind of thanked her for her music and her advocacy, and I got choked up, I got emotional, and she gave me a hug. And I told my partner, I said, Joan Baez hugged me. That's as close as I'm going to get to sleeping with Bob Dylan. So that's why I wrote it, right? So I put off seeing the movie kind of because he's this historic figure and he plays a big part in my musical legacy. And the only thing I'd say about it is, I mean, I think Timothy Chalamet is amazing in everything he does. Bob Dylan, and maybe he was this way, is portrayed as kind of a jerk. Like he's true to himself, and maybe he is that person, but he can be a pretty harsh individual. At least that's how it's portrayed.
Very nice. Have you found that creativity from music influences how you solve problems or lead in technology? Do you think there's a like a back and forth between tech, music?
What I have seen, I don't know if it's so much the problem solving, although maybe there's seems to be a tie-in to technology and music. So the number of musicians and good musicians I know who have somehow found their way into tech is pretty significant. Whether it's a part-time thing, but a lot of these people are really good musicians. There's a whole group set up. Like I say, I'm working for Meta right now, and there's entire internal groups, discussion groups, where people post videos of what they're learning on guitar, the gear. They ask questions. So there's almost like a sub community of that, and it once again, it seems as though there's a tie-in. I'm not exactly sure what that is, except that maybe there is a logic to music. I'm not a big theory guy. I mean, I've learned just by osmosis over the years. You learn it, but then I'm kind of a big fan of Rick Beato's music channel, and you learn so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
music theory there, and you kind of go, oh, that's why it makes sense. Now I see why you could do that chord progression and drop from that major to that minor chord. And it sounds so, gives it that tone or whatever it is. But it seems like there may be a similar structure in approaching the kind of the core or underlying piece of it. I'm probably smarter people than me have figured that out, and there's probably stuff written about it.
Um, I've seen the same. I lead a software development company. I play drums. I'm an attorney, but I see so many IT professionals that are great at music that it's amazing. And yeah, I don't know that much about theory as well, but I know there's a logic and a mathematical sort of balance to everything that it just blows my mind. I don't
Yeah.
comprehend it as I would want it to, but there is something there that is amazing and how
Look,
we feel, right? How we feel about music and the frequency of the sounds and the combination and how that makes us feel. It's like there's something there.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, look, and it is very mathematical. Even just tone, even a sound is it's it's how many waves per second are hitting
Right.
your eardrums,
Right.
right? So it is a mathematical, logical, equation.
Um, Matt, last question to you. What is your advice for younger generations building their career in tech right now? What skills matter most and why?
Well, I think it's very obvious that you're going to have to be engross yourself in AI and the tools that are available. I don't think you can make a wrong choice per se, but you have to be flexible and keep your ear to the ground. What's coming up? What are people using? Be part of a community where you ask questions and find out about blind spots you may have. And then you still need to understand data governance. You need understand how a database works, right? I think one of the greatest things you could do is just understand how relational data works. And look, AI can teach you that, but really understand it. Do some simple systems that do some kind of controlled structure, because to me that's the piece that's kind of missing as people jump into tools that will build screens for you, that will even save data for you. You can build something super powerful that really tracks and stores things incorrectly that will make future changes more difficult. So I think that's a skill. And then, um, I don't claim to be a futurist. I don't know what the future holds as far as all of this technology. It can both be worrisome and exciting at the same time, and I think that's normal. And so I think it behooves us to once again be aware that that's okay. That's not it's not an irrational feeling to feel some anxiety over this. But I think once again, what you can try and do is just be involved in a community of people who are making progress in areas so that you're aware of what's coming down the pipe. And then learn to play guitar and be ready to be a rock star if everything falls apart.
I love it. Matthew Moran, once again, thank you so much for being here. If anyone listening right now would like to listen to your music, know more about Matthew Moran, about your books, about whatever, what's the best way they can go about that?
Sure. Two places you can really find links to everything I have going on. One is MatthewMoranOnline.com. It's kind of my music focused website. And then it'll link you to my newsletter is now, I used to use MailChimp. I've now transferred that to Substack because I wanted things that kind of lived in perpetuity, more like a blog. And so I have a Substack, which is MatthewMoran.substack.com. And I write about music and other experiences. So you can check me out there, and I'd love that.
I love it. Thank you again for being on my show. I hope that we can stay in touch and do this again in the future. And maybe sometime we will meet. You will play the guitar. I will do some percussion or drumming for you.
Hey,
That will be a dream come true.
oh, that'd be great. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.